that. We gotta change up that tarps off photo in the intro.
If anybody wants to know how important Dakota Josh was to the Vancouver Canucks, that was the game. Okay, so condiments. This is everything.
Everything. So we run the gamut completely, right?
I'm talking about sriracha on the bottle.
Sriracha?
Sriracha. It's that silent R that screws me up.
Is it a silent R?
I don't know. Like, who's tall?
Who's tall?
Chris Pronger, wasn't he tall?
Chris Pronger was tall, yeah.
Welcome to the PP1 podcast.
Are you kidding me? That's what?
Ooh, new view. What's this?
Oh,
POV cam?
I had to make some changes.
POV cam over at Ted's side of the building there?
Something like that.
Yeah, I feel uncomfortable already.
Like I always say, something weird if you make it weird.
I agree. Welcome, friends. Welcome to the PP1 podcast. You'll notice there's a new circle in the corner. We have switched networks. We are... finish installing sync. I don't want to do that. This podcast is live. We are on the Area 51 Sports Network. We're very happy. Thank you to our previous network for hosting us for a few years. Nothing but good memories. We just needed a change, and everybody's cool with that. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it our way. We're gonna do it the way this show started, unless someone wants to pay us a lot of money, and we'll do it slightly differently. Because that we call that selling out, and we're not quite ready to. Are you ready to sell? If somebody's,
I don't think we're sought after enough to sell it.
No, we're not. We're definitely the number one Canucks hockey podcast in Kelowna, so we got that going for us. So that's good. Hey, Grant, welcome to the show, buddy.
Oh, my man.
So we're gonna talk some Canucks, talk some hockey, and of course, we're gonna do it in the way that we know how. Ted, it's been at least 3 days since I've seen you. Your face and in person the last time I seen you.
Yeah, that was a good little hang.
It was a good day. Folks, you can also comment along on YouTube, Facebook, and I'm assuming the Area 51 Twitter account. So we're going to see how that goes.
That's fun.
I don't know. Let's just, if you want to come by and say hello, you can do that. And maybe you just want to say hello. That's fine.
Look at that.
No more, no less. But yeah, man, we hung out on Sunday. It was a good time. My clothes immediately reeked as soon as I got home. I didn't know any better, but I was very happy. I was told to get out of the room in a louder voice than I'm giving right now.
Bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So kind of like what your wife did, but on the Kelowna side of things, basically. Chili Crunch. Yeah. We should call this episode Chili Crunch.
Christine's fly together.
They do. Unfortunately, this is one of those times. Whatever. It was good. That's I put it on my tacos last night. The Chili Crunch.
That's a good call. I never really thought of putting Chili Crunch on tacos, but that's a great idea.
So here's a disclaimer. I mean, if you don't want to then necessarily have too much, I don't know, you use turkey or ground beef or whatever your taco filling is.
Whatever was on sale.
Yes.
Like if I can choose, I'm doing like a beef pork mix.
Oh,
or like maybe a step higher than that. I'll do a beef chorizo mix is my kind of.
Oh, geez, you roll deep, man. That's crazy. Yeah. So again, you don't want to then season the meat too much because then this Chili Crunch is too powerful. It just adds this extra boost of it. It can overtake the first flavor, and then you got too much going on, and then you pay for it the next morning. Anyway, good Chili Crunch. I'm gonna try to plow through that as quick as possible so I can get a refill. That's my plan. That is my end game.
Okay, we'll just have to make more. We
could just
take up another Sunday, another 2 hours, and we'll make more.
Yeah, we could do that.
I'm going to make you help with the prep this time.
Listen, stirring is hard, okay? That is tough to do. I didn't see you doing it.
You were a very good stirrer.
I didn't see you doing it. You're over here just sitting on the couch watching the Canucks game, just checking his phones. Like, I'm right here. This is your life right here. So I don't know what you had going on. Your entire family was in the room, so it's not like you got any excuses. That's on you at this point. So
great
whatever. Hey, also same to you, friend. Things are moving.
Mhm.
Jared Allen. Do you know who Jared Allen is?
I do know who
Remember
Jared
that?
Allen is.
Yeah, he follows Mulligan now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. Apparently,
Former Team Canada
was he Spokane Chief?
represent. I think there was like this cool story about him. Like he saved his dad from like a farming accident or whatever. Like pulled him out of the
What?
water when he was drowning. Yeah.
Really?
I want to like I could be butchering the story badly, but I think there was he's like farmer strong, right? And so I think there was an
Interesting.
accident. He saved his dad's life out of like some sort of potential accident. I can't remember if it was drowning or just like pulled him out of wreckage or something. Maybe it was both. I don't know.
Jared Allen.
You might have to fact check that story, but
He's
I can't remember.
gonna.
I can't remember when the year would have been for World Juniors. I feel like maybe 2008, 2009.
Yeah, I'm not going to find this story easily.
Yeah.
We'll have to check. I'll have to fact check you later.
There. Well, I am fact checked in the sense that Grant says that farmer strong is absolutely a thing. So I'm
Oh,
right.
100%, man. That's why all those farm boys are such good NHLers, right? Joe Thornton, and then eventually just grow a beard. That's the end result of farming. It's just like you grow a beard and do whatever the heck
like
you want.
mountain man strong.
Yeah, so you go from like farmer man to mountain man. Ted, your volume is a bit distant. I can hear it just fine. Maybe you need better speakers. Sounds great. Sounds great in my neck of the woods.
Okay.
Maybe
well,
I
I don't know. As long as this podcast has been on, my volume hasn't been good. So I think it's a tech support thing.
It's it's an ID10T error, as the joke is. If anybody gets that one.
Is it better like this? Am I confirmed that this is better now? I don't know.
To me, it's the same. So it's going to sound the same. I don't know. I can't help you there. I can't help you. So we got Canucks. We're going to talk a lot of Canucks today because there's a lot to talk about. Mostly Drew O'Connor, but we'll get into some other stuff. They're winning again, so that's fun.
That's fun.
That's always a good sign. Again, I do want to bring in. We're on Area 51 Sports Network. This is our new home going forward. We're going to make a commitment to be live every Wednesday night unless there's a Canucks game on. That is going to be our goal. Then we'll probably either pivot to a Thursday or we'll just go after the Canucks game. We'll see. Depends. We got lives too. We got to do stuff.
We got wives.
Yeah, we got lives and we got lives and wives. We may or may not have this as a podcast this week because we're getting those details. So it might just be video this week. I'll have to talk to my guy that brought us over, my man James. So anyway, Ted, I know you've been wanting to just get into all of this. I was at Emerge last Friday with my daughter thinking that she may need to have her appendix out. And sitting in emergency, the entire Canucks organization shifted within 2 hours or less. Like, unfreaking believable. Everything was happening. Everything is happening. JT Miller is no longer a Vancouver Canuck. He is now a New York Ranger again. They then parlayed that, and they got Marcus Pettersson, who just signed like 2 hours ago, which is wild. We have Drew O'Connor.
Yeah. Off the phone for a couple hours. Of course, that happens.
I literally saw this on just before I drove home. So I think 5 by 5.5 or 6 by 5.5. I think. Okay. So they've locked up a guy that it looks like they're trying to get. They said it happened really quickly. Everybody was happy with the numbers and the term. We got for the time being 3 PDs. 3-peat. It's gonna be good. So we got Marcus Pettersson. We have Philip Hedl. Silence. It's a silence on the front. So it's going to be a crazy time. They got Drew O'Connor. Who else am I missing? I feel like there's Mancini. Or how do you say his last name? Is that Mancini. How you say it? Victor Mancini. So they locked up these guys. And then obviously we can't call him DPD anymore because as of yesterday, after the win, I believe it was
Young PD.
Was it Susie or something? Called him Young PD. So going forward, there's no DPD. It is official. He's Young PD, which is so awesome. Like it's such
a I love that Marcus Pettersson's nickname in Pittsburgh was PD.
Yeah.
As well.
So we're gonna we're gonna just, and you can't call him Markey because that's kind of like the Markstrom thing. So what are we calling MPete?
3
Call
PD,
him 3PD, MPD? I don't know.
tall PD.
Tall PD. Yeah, we got some options. Long PD because he's signed long term.
I mean, you could call him Skinny Pete because he's only like
Skinny
175 pounds. Yeah.
I mean, that works too. So we've got options, but JT Miller, the saga is over. The drama, Jersey Shore is all done. There's no more offline drama, no more locker room stuff. Sounds like there was some things we didn't know about. And eventually one day we'll find out about these things. But JT Miller is in New York. He is no longer Vancouver Canuck, which does suck as far as the talent portion goes.
Of course.
But I mean, it's done. It's over. So your initial, I think we'll get into our feelings on it, but like your initial thought, like that it happened in general, the fact that they pulled the trigger on it.
Like it was time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it's hard to elaborate that much more on it other than like something had to give. Like, I think they were just at that point for the longest time when it first happened. It was, I was of the mindset that like, you guys are pros. This is a job, work it out, find a way to make it work. But there comes a certain time where they're going to make a move because something has to give and it's starting to affect the team as a whole. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I was okay that it was JT. I would have preferred that it was JT out of the two of them, but I think that's only a portion of it, right? Like, if Pedersen is still on watch here. I mean, it's not over. He's still being evaluated. He's in the middle of his 3-month grace period, right? I mean, 3-month grace period has basically been like a year, but at some point they're going to make a decision on him too, and whether he's a part of this team next year or not.
Like probation
has a lot to do with probation has a lot to do with when this trade clause kicks in, right?
Yeah, and I think so. Getting into this bigger picture, everyone's like, "Oh, the trade, wasn't it was underwhelming on the surface." Then they go and make the Skinny Pete trade, and with the draft pick that they acquired. I mean, they moved quick. That was a wild Friday night. Like everything was happening. I'm like, I need to be yelling and screaming, and this is the wrong place to do it. But it all kind of happened, and then they go make that. And again, how do they even know they're going to sign him? I mean, you don't think you're going to make all these moves without these things being thought of. I got like something in my eye here. Anyway, so that happens. They make the trade. You've got kind of some certainty as far as, okay, the drama is over. This is what the team's going to look like, at least going into tomorrow, right? Or no, this was going into the Dallas game. Some of this stuff happened. And then the trades after the Dallas game, after they lost, that's when the Pedersen one happened. But then you go into the next game, and now you've got kind of a new collection of guys. You've got Filipino, who I already think has shown that he can do some damage for the Canucks. Quick hands, quick decision-making, I think could be a real boon for this team. You've got young Petey,
he's smooth out there. Like he looks good.
Yeah, I mean, nice addition. I think sometimes it's just we need to change a pace too. Like we need somebody to be the spark that we didn't know was going to be a spark, and he's not flashy, and it's not the marquee name.
Pretty flashy. He had some moves to try to gain the line a couple times. Like better hands than I thought that he was going to have. He has some dangles. Quick player.
I think it's probably because he's buried in that organization. Maybe that's why we're not getting maybe that's why the book on him wasn't as glamorous, is because he's kind of not buried, but he's not the name that they're assuming that they were going to get, but it's maybe not who everybody thought they wanted to get. But I mean, I think he blends in just perfectly so far, like as far as he goes.
Well, it's a very Euro heavy team. And I think he fits in well with those guys. I think it helped that he knew Hronek coming over. He looks at home on the power play, which is nice. He looks like he's an attacking center, which is, I'm not saying that he's, I'm not saying that he's the same as JT, but JT was a goal scoring attacking center as well that could make plays. But in fact, it was a huge part of his game. But to see this guy who looks like he could be dangerous off the rush, and then push the pace in the offensive zone, I mean, it helps, right? Like, I don't think he's a scrub coming back. I think he's definitely not JT Miller. Like, let's be clear about that. But this is a player that like looks more now like he's got a little bit of development track ahead of him than he possibly looked as a stagnated player in New York. And I think a lot of that has to do with injuries, and injuries will be a concern with this player moving forward. But he's got some size too. Could be potentially a really nice fit for Vancouver down the road.
It's again, sometimes it's not like the flashy thing that you want. It's the thing that kind of gets there, and you realize like, oh, this is maybe what we needed, though. You know, like you've already got a guy that's a legitimate, he's not a star, but he's a contributing NHL top forward, right? You already know what your floor is on this guy, and he's just into his career. So, why not make him the next guy that actually figures himself out in Vancouver and he gets embraced? Like all it takes is like 2 goals and, wicked shift in the guys in Canucks lore instantly. Right? Like it's pretty easy to get loved in this organization as a fan base. You do a couple good things and back it up maybe for a little bit and don't suck after that. Like just kind of keep it at the very least here. And we're going to like it.
Important for him to have a good game, his first game out. And follow that up by another strong showing. That Colorado game was pretty dominant by the squad. I feel like they got lucky on
we'll get into that in a bit.
Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Hedl featured heavily in that game. So, one of the first things you can do, and we always talk about this, is that winning solves everything. But for him to be able to feature in that win is an important piece and look dangerous. I mean, that's what more can you ask for a player coming over that not necessarily everybody wanted to see moved.
Yeah.
Because there was lots of debates on who it should have been. To sort of quell that, right? Winning solves everything, essentially.
It does. It is one of those things, doesn't matter the sport, and you can kind of curb the funk. And like Grant says, especially because Miller had 2 goals. I wasn't necessarily, I'm not one of those guys that it's going to be like, oh, he's got to match what the other guy did. Because, they're very different players too. However, it doesn't hurt that contribution came in. Again, I like to just get back to like his hands and just his decision making. Like things were happening. Like it was almost kind of like not like Thomas Vanek, but when you get a guy, it's just like he's there, makes his play, makes a shot. And that specific play is over. I think that's good. That's something that this team needs, a little bit more of that energy boost. And then speaking of an energy boost, did we just get found money somehow with EP or Young PD? Like
I don't
in the last 2 games, all of a sudden, like he's got his own fan club. Like this guy has turned heads. He had quite the game against Colorado. Throwing hits, making plays, and just sound as a defenseman. Like he's noticeable and not noticeable at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is not like an accident that he's.
Oh, I know.
Quality, right? I mean, he reminds me a lot of without the offensive ability, but he reminds me a lot of Matthias Holland.
Okay, I could see that.
Steady back there. He's a big guy. He's physical. He's sort of in the mix on just about everything, and he just looks like a really terrible player to have to play against.
Who was the guy that he hit and he just stared him down? I can't remember.
Oh,
we just kept looking at him like, dude, like he doesn't care. Yeah, he kept staring at him like, I swear, if you like tilt this guy, the place is gonna go berserk.
His first shift in North America, I believe he was, maybe it's not his first shift, but his first game he was playing in Abbotsford and had Likaramaki on his on the ice at the same time. Took a big hit and Pettersson took exception to that and took over the guy physically, and I got into a skirmish with him, right? I mean, he's just kind of an established dominance player. I think he was that for Team Sweden during the World Juniors, watching him play. He was that in the Swedish Elite League too, this sort of stout defender. And I think he's got some Matthias Holland to his game. Not the offensive chops, like let's be clear on that. It's not that Olin was a world beater, but he had some ability to really move the puck. So we'll see how much he can grow over the next little bit. He's still being really sheltered, right? I mean, we're
Just
talking
like a controlled nastiness, though.
yes, 16 minutes a game. Like you can get into those types of things, but for a guy who barely played any real minutes on the DN, and I know that we're sort of talking about the quality in his game, like we sure heard his name a lot, and not for bad reasons. He was a part of just about every skirmish and scrum.
And then to have Marcus Pettersson in there as well. Like, again, what a weekend. You go from Friday to today, and they're already have like the Susie, he's available. Like, this team instantly changed, like the back end, which we've talked about all season, especially with like the injuries. And I mean, Quinn Hughes didn't even play yesterday, and that was one of the best games of the season for the Canucks. But now you've got a defense that doesn't scare you. Like, it's not like, oh, well, hopefully we get our offensive contributions because we're going to need it. Like, the defense looked great yesterday. And I mean, the offense, the first period was kind of like, meh, but it definitely gained momentum as that game went on. And we'll get into the posts that kept them lucky and, eventually the shutout. But there's like this confidence all of a sudden. I mean, I said after the game to Christine, I said, this is like the happiest I've felt about this team like 3 weeks. Like, it was just like this complete turnover of feeling that, like, I felt confident. I'm like, well, they're not world beaters, but man, like, I feel confident with this team right now. Not that they're going to go out and just destroy everybody, but I believe that there are some difference makers on that team, or at the very least, they can play a competitive 60 minutes. And I like their chances on the teams they should beat. And I think they've got an opportunity to beat, or at least compete with the teams that, they've normally been in the mix with. Like, you put this game, you put an effort like they had against Edmonton, and then you flip it, you have the game that they had against Colorado. Now, I'm not saying the results are the same, but I mean, the way I felt about that game and the way I feel about this game are very different. Like, it's a different team in a week.
I mean, it really is, right? And I think some of that just happens by nature of trading a guy like Miller, right? I mean, it's whether you're a guy that believes that Miller should have been here or not, when something that big happens on the team, it shocks everyone else that's still there, right? It's like some sort of shot in the arm, and they can either react negatively or positively. So it was a different response from Vancouver than it was prior to him leaving. But you're right. I think Pettersson brings like a certain quality back to the defense. I think the team overall in its skill department is probably lesser than it was before, but the defense is now raised, right? Like it raises both the ceiling and the floor of this decor. And I'm kind of surprised, if we're being honest, about Susie's name being mentioned in trade. I don't dislike the player. I think he was a really important piece last year when he was playing. Obviously, there was some troubles with injury last year. But yeah, I think just like any other player that's on this roster, I think these guys become exposed. See Tyler Myers, although not lately. Like, become exposed when they play out of their depth and they play out of their role, right? So to me, like, Susie is the perfect guy to man minutes on the second pairing if you need him as a partner defender, right? He can't be the top guy on the pair. Or he can anchor a third pairing, with ease, if we're being honest, right? And I think Vancouver's done like a really interesting thing here in signing Pettersson, who I'm not crazy about, but the number seems decent. I thought he was going to go for a little bit higher than that. They wrapped this guy up awfully quickly, as you noticed, right? I think, but they're doing an interesting thing here, sort of heading into next season, right? And if Willander plays, he could play as soon as this year. I mean, you could be looking at.
We haven't even talked about him yet. Yeah,
we could be looking at a future pairing, because now that Pettersson's locked up, with Willander playing one side and Pettersson on the other, you get to keep Hronek with Hughes, who don't count this out, but I'm sure has a big say on what's going on in there. And then you have a bunch of other pieces and guys like Susie, Myers, Juleson. But we know that Susie Myers tandem can work, especially as a third pair. So I would be surprised on why they would want to move away from him so quickly, unless it's to somehow partner in with something else, shed some more salary and secure yourself.
Yeah, because I mean, now you've got two PDs on the back end, right? And then you've got, like, you kind of mentioned one, but not the other. So really, this is future looking, but
Yeah.
you've got a potential future core of two Pedersons, Hughes, Hronik, and Willander, and then whoever that you probably want a bit more of a hulking guy back there. I mean, Tyler Myers, I guess, is still there. So,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, that is your six. And again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that's, if that starts to pan out as a competent, three pairs, that's not bad. That's a pretty good little setup, and that's just your defense. But now you have a defense that you can be confident in. You've got your star players. You've got obviously Quinn Hughes, who is the absolute pinnacle of all of that. But you can have the confidence of that top pair, knowing that the other guys are going to be complementary when they do come on the ice. You're not going to think like, oh, well, they need to be minute munchers. They're going to do that as well as complement the forward group, which I think is it's like a different version of last year, but it's more of a longer term view.
Yeah, I mean, just by virtue of adding Pedersen, the team is better at moving the puck, and it's not even that he's a world beater by any means. It's just that
they didn't have it.
The previous options were almost completely null and void, right? So,
yeah,
G mentions here, Susie just seems slightly out of place. I think there's any chance that there's a tie with the Miller situation. Maybe he's a bigger voice in the room than we all know. There's just so much that we don't know. But what I would be surprised by is if the coaching staff and this regime thought that Elias Pettersson was a better answer down the stretch than Carson Soucy. I just don't see that. I think it's a fantastic thing to continue to work on to develop. And like Vancouver does, they kind of develop guys and give them cups of coffee and then sort of give them that, like, hey, this is what it looks like at the next level thing to sort of get better. And it's a nice little feather in their cap to have another one of their prospects make the squad, because there hasn't been a lot lately. Which also sort of brings us, and I don't want to forget about all of these things, but they dealt Melvin Fernstrom in that trade for Miller as well. So there's another prospect that we had sort of selected with one of our remaining high picks last year that's now out of the cupboard as well. Albeit they replaced it by getting a Mancini in, who's a little bit further along, obviously. But I still think that if you have guys like Pettersson making the squad and Likaramaki and one day Willander, that next wave of guys has to start being there to develop as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think because that you've skipped your step, like you've basically said, we're going to trade some development for guys that are a few years into their career that are already contributing members of a team, right? Like you're not waiting for call-ups. They're guys that are ready to play. So, and that's the window they're in right now, is they need the ready to play guys and a little bit of that crossover. And I think, this whole Abbotsford thing has just been absolutely amazing for this organization. So it's good that they're finally having guys cross over to the big club.
I couldn't agree more with that. Like even with the team playing bad, there's still an emphasis on development, which is what we all wanted. That didn't work when they were in Chicago, when they were part of the Wolves organization. That didn't always fit the bill when they were in Manitoba. There was directive to winning hockey games, and sometimes veterans got to play. And for the most part, this is a really, what was a really inexperienced lineup with young players that are all sort of cutting their teeth in pro hockey, and it's been really good for development. Some guys have probably gotten further than they were supposed to get, and dudes like Daniela Klimovich, and some that are getting roles early, right? So it's nice to see. I think, I guess we're probably talking about all the players in this trade, but Victor Mancini is going to be a really interesting guy moving forward. He's a big dude. He skates pretty well. Like he's got a good shot. He seems like the kind of guy that you think like an Adam Foote type coach would want to get his hands on to develop, right? Got all the tools, can move the puck probably better than your average guy. He's already played some games in New York, so obviously they thought highly of him enough to sort of accelerate his development, much like Elias Pettersson, sorry. That's going to be a really also a right-handed guy. I think he's he could be an instant upgrade over freaking what's his face that we just traded. Why can I not remember his name?
Descharnes.
Yeah. Then he could be an instant upgrade over a guy like Vinny Desharnais, just simply by virtue of being able to move the puck better.
Yeah.
So this is, that's going to be. I can't wait to see him play. Honestly, I'm really excited. That to me, Ryan, could be the found money.
So what's the nice thing about Mancini is you're going to get to see him in Abbotsford. Like as far as a fan base goes, right? Like I'm going to take it to the fan portion for a second, not the analytical podcast guy.
We need Grant to give us a scouting report. He's our eyes and ears in Abbotsford.
But you know what? That's what I'm getting at is that you're going to start seeing these guys that they've traded for. We're going to get a book on some of them and think like, oh, you're going to love them. Like that was the beauty about Chris Faber and Corey. And I mean, I'm going to use those two guys mainly, but we knew what we were getting once when Höglander came up, or like when there's certain players that came in, like you're going to love this player because they've watched so much of the game. And then they get into the lineup. They're like, oh man, I'm so happy this guy's finally on the big club because all we've seen is just awesome clips and, fan account. And now we get to see it on the big club where it actually matters, right? Like as simple as the funny thing that Corey Hergott had was, watch how many times Demko plays the puck with his helmet, right? And then for like a season and a half, like we were seeing it all the time. And I just grin every time because I'm thinking of the guy that's seen, countless games of Thatcher Demko playing the puck off his head in Utica or wherever, right? So it's neat that we're going to see a little bit more on the development side too when these trades are starting to come through. So Vinny Desharnais gone. I think it's probably instantly the Canucks are going to take less penalties just by him not being here anymore. So that's like 6 less penalties a game. So that's good. But again, so this is what I want to get into, and we've had this conversation many a time. I think we talked about this on Sunday, but the Canucks made some bad bets. Management made some bad bets on Desharnais. Who else am I thinking? Like there's a few guys that they've probably realized that they've signed, and I don't think Soucy's one of those guys, but maybe they've signed some guys that they believed, or the lack of signing like Zadorov and Lindholm. You think like, oh, they really missed on this, or they really screwed this one up. Well, pretty much every previous regime has just either doubled down or hung on to that guy where it became a liability to the point where you couldn't trade it away, or it started affecting the rest of the lineup or the rest of the roster. So what they did in the last week, and well, had we recorded on Saturday, we could have said in the last day, is that they saw that they screwed up. They corrected it. It cost them a little bit. Optically, doesn't look great. But they got ahead of it at that point, and they tried to correct what was there and get better instantly. And at the very least, they don't have those problems anymore. At the very least. But they admit it, like in a roundabout way, they've admitted to their mistakes without actually publicly saying, yeah, we screwed up. And honestly, it's so refreshing as a fan that cares at that level to say, you know what? We just wanted honesty. And this is about as honest as you're going to get without them saying it. And I'm here for it. So the trades that they made, although they're not marquee moves that make this team an instant contender, I think there's enough that happened that I can think, you know what? You guys still got back pieces that made this team capable of winning this season and, in the future. And you guys were able to do this and just say like, yeah, we screwed up. We're sorry. Here's the things we believe are going to keep this afloat. And what else can you ask for?
Oh, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and it was like, oh, like, what are they doing trading Heinen and Desharnais away? Like, they just traded for those, like, they just signed those guys.
They
like,
did.
How ridiculous is this regime? And I was like, are you a Canucks fan? Like, how on earth could this be so difficult for you to understand in having to watch years of Eric Branson, and then also having to watch little things Louis Eriksson, because you can't trade a guy like that. Well, this regime is kind of Jay Beagle. That's not this regime, but this regime is like, they've shown that conviction to be like, we'll make the trade. They even made the Louis trade. Like
Yeah.
we'll make the trade. We'll get it done. We'll move on from this, and we'll find a way through it. And I think I have to be appreciative that if not that Heinen was bad, like not at all, right? But like Vinny was not good. And if I had to watch like another year of that, I probably wouldn't be that impressed while they're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like
Yeah.
I can appreciate that you were forward thinking and you took the bet on trying to develop a player who's come a long way in a short time because he has some major physical intangibles. And I appreciate the fact that you went a completely off route to go get yourself a Kuzmenko. But then recognize when it's an issue and move the piece. And that's why this Susie thing, if they think it's an issue, or Pedersen, I don't fear the fact that they could make a trade and not knowing. It's simply if they want to make a trade, they will make a trade.
Mhm.
And they'll do it quickly and they'll do it with conviction and they'll move on to the next piece. And I can really appreciate that about this management group.
I've asked for that for like the entire Jim Benning era, basically. Even I'm sure there's a few moves that Mike Gillis made that. Remember how we've just all said, like, wouldn't it be so nice if management of any team just said, listen, we screwed up. We're going to own it. Let's move on. Let's try to get better. And let's try to win. Well, this is about as close as that gets. And they did all that. And again, like a perfect example, this worked in their favor a little bit, but the way they beat Colorado yesterday, and a lot of that was goaltending as well. But that was a team that I can get on board with. And then I think, geez, management got it done. And I'm not even thinking about all the other things. They have cap space and they have a potential to actually make a blockbuster move at the deadline, like bigger than JT Miller. How do you make a bigger move than that? Like, I do know, and I don't necessarily want to know the answer yet, but like the Canucks actually could do some pretty wild things at the deadline that are like, that they haven't done since 2011. And even then, 2011 was just complementary pieces.
If Mitch Marner goes to free agency, they're going to be in on Mitch Marner. Like they haven't been in a position to be in on a player like that. Like this is like Panarin going to free agency and they can go get their hands on a Panarin. Right? Like the fact that just think about just comes up just as we're talking about it, OEL buyout. Just think about where we were just prior to the OEL thing. Like
that close.
We were this close to the cap, razor thin. This team was terrible. It couldn't do anything. This team made the move to get rid of OEL's contract. I'm sure he's a great guy. But this team shook it up and then made the changes, right? And yeah, there was some short-term pain, just as G says, you should post this one. But like without a regime that's willing to make those moves and has the connection to do those things, this team would be sunk dead in the water. And teams make mistakes all the time. And just like you said, how quickly can you turn around on and move up to the next thing?
And they did it. They did it before we went to bed. Like it was already done. It was over. That was the move. And you went to bed and you're like, well, tomorrow could be even crazier. And it wasn't. Thankfully, I think we all needed a break after Friday night. But like 2 weeks in a row, the NHL is just like, all right, don't go to bed yet.
What's Vancouver doing? And yeah, he's right. This team got panned for that OEL move at the time too. But they had the foresight to see where it was going to go and their projections. And that's why this team of analysts is so big to decide on how they're going to make these decisions. And it was the right call. They're not all the right calls. Period.
And
there were some big mistakes.
And that's why they made the moves that they just did.
So you go for just prior to trading OEL being razor thin up against the cap to now having the same type of money that you can play with any player that shows up in free agency.
Literally any player.
Genius. It's genius.
Like if there was no, and I'm just going to say this just as the hyperbole ridiculousness, but like, yeah, same thing. If Willie Stiles came up or Austin Matthews, like any one of those three guys, if they were available, the Canucks could be in on.
Yeah, the Canucks are the Canucks are the new Maple Leafs in this sense, right? They're going to be in on every single conversation now because they have A, room, and B, cap space.
And
like, they're motivated to make a move. Not every team has the ability to go out and acquire themselves a Matthew Tkachuk for two guys that are sort of aging and might have like poor contracts moving forward, like Florida does. That was such a that was such a crazy thing. And then same with Vegas getting their hands on Eichel, right? To be able to reload yourself and get yourself number one centers, that's going to be a difficult thing to do. But they're going to find a way, I think. I mean, I feel like this management group is going to, and that's also weird saying I have confidence in this group after so long of not. They're going to find a way to sort of replenish and reload this talent, I feel like. And
so your feeling, you've been saying to me the last couple of days, like the feeling, not that there's rumors or anything, but like you got the big vibes out of Ottawa. Well,
I think it's like shortly after we talked about this, I think their rumors are out there now that Daniel Norris is like a possible Josh Norris has been watching some F1 there. That Norris is like it could be a fit in a trade, right? And
I mean, maybe he's available too.
He may be, right? Those guys,
maybe the Dodgers will get him though. Watch out.
Yeah, or he'll get traded to the Lakers. One of the other.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know what I was talking about.
Norris.
Yeah, Norris, right? I mean, there's lots to worry about with Norris, obviously. The fact there's like crazy amounts of injuries. He's hurt again. He's not going to be up and running until after the trade deadline, I think. But there's an exciting player there. Like, is that guy available? Should they be taking bets on that? I think I would say with certainty that Besser's going to get moved. And, I don't want to steal quotes here. And I know that Grant said this earlier, but this is not a good look on the Pettersson signing for the Besser camp.
I kind of disagree. I think that's a different kettle of fish because this opportunity, it's a different situation. It's not that they don't want to sign Besser. I think based on the trade they made and what they can shore up, like we've had this conversation about Hughes and PD, and like sometimes you have to sign one guy first, right? And I think that's what they did with this one. I don't think it. I mean, you probably take it personally if you're Besser just because you're due a contract. But I also don't think that they're just saying, oh, well, this guy deserved the money first. I think it was a situation where they could get it done and there was no beating around the bush. Or like, we can lock this in and it's over. We can still spend money on Besser, but let's take a longer approach at him. Because maybe they don't know what they still have with Besser. Maybe they're not convinced.
Well, the impression is that no real conversations has been had between the two sides about where it's not like they're even negotiating right now, right? Like, and I don't think that it has anything to do with the two players because they are very different. But in the sense that a player walks over and he's signed within like 3 days, and they get a hold of his camp and make the deal and put the effort out to sign the player, and they haven't even discussed with the other player.
Yeah, so
you're very right. It is different circumstances, as in one circumstance that they want to sign the player and one circumstance that they're not even willing to discuss it.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like I says the guy that isn't exactly Brock Besser at all. I'm talking about me. Like I can say this easily because I'm not waiting on that kind of money. I'm not waiting on a massive payday personally. I'd like to be, but realistically, I can't be in his shoes. But how I see it is, well, these are the kind of things you have to do because this is how the organization needs to keep going. He's still an asset to the Canucks, and it will be decided one way or another, whether it's via trade or they do sign him. But I don't think it's the time for that yet. Like, I think there's still more to do there. And maybe they trade it. Maybe he's gone by the time they come back from Four Nations. Who knows?
I just think that I totally see what you're saying, and I understand that side of it. I think that the writing on the wall to me is that this is a senior veteran player that's been a part of this core for basically the entirety of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And they sign a guy who arrived within 3 days and haven't had a conversation with a guy that you either believe or you don't believe is part of your core.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if I was to be certain about one more player that's going to get moved, I feel like that player is Brock Besser.
But don't you feel like if you look at the Pettersson one, don't you feel like if they're like, oh, wow, we can sign him for this and there's next to no negotiating going on and that makes sense for a D-core. Now we've got 3 guys locked up decently long-term. And the whole Besser thing, again, they've earmarked where they think he's going to be, and this other one locks it in, and they get their certainty on the back end. That trade is now made, and they don't have to think about it anymore. And then they can focus all the talks on Besser. Like Maybe they're just not talking anyway, regardless. Well, that shouldn't affect what just happened.
Then what does that show then? If you're not even discussing it with your guy that you believe is part of your
But that happens all the time, Ted.
No,
It happens. It does.
I don't think it does, man. I think that if you have a guy, look at the breakdown that happened in Colorado. Like, those guys were discussing, but progress was getting made. Rantanen knew that he was either going to sign a deal and they would give him what they want, or they'll figure it out later. Instead of figure it out later, zero communication, boom, you're gone.
I mean, that one I think was shocking. Don't get me wrong. That's a big shocker, that one.
When you're not communicating, like, I mean, you've worked with enough teams for long enough that no communication is probably bad when you come to a pending decision, right? Like, I just feel like he's the guy that's going.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is that I think, like I said in the chat there, that's me. I think it's just two kettles of fish. I think they're two different things, and you have to treat them separately. They shouldn't affect each other. That's my opinion, and I'm right, but that's not the point. Like, it's. You may be right on this. You may be right that no talk is bad talk, and that this is the beginning of the end of Brock Besser as a Canuck. That's entirely possible. The way I'm looking at it is that they're two different situations that have nothing to do with each other. That's my opinion.
I'll say one more point before you just squash this thing, right? I think this regime has shown in the past that if they want to get a deal done, they're discussing with the player, and I'll link.
That's fair. I'll give you that.
I'll link Elias. They continued to talk to him, right? I don't want to sign a deal until the end of the year. Keep pushing. They managed to sign him in season, which PD said he wasn't going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same with the JT Miller thing. There was talk about him being moved right up until the final hour. One of the biggest surprises from this regime was that the fact that they actually locked down JT Miller. They signed him. They got their guy when everybody else thought that it was not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then when it didn't work out with Bo Horvat, they were talking, they were pushing, they wanted him. This was the number. And then boom, couldn't reach it, couldn't come to a decision. They got rid of them, right? But they went through all those steps to see it through to the very end. When there's no conversation happening with a guy, like that's when I'm thinking to myself that something is not in priority here. And either they see it as a different kettle of fish and different things need to be dealt with in another way. I see it as a guy who's not a priority.
Grant, it's a kettle of fish, not fist. I don't want to get into that conversation. I don't want to see a kettle of fist personally. That's a movie that I said I'd never watch twice.
Something.
Yeah, it's I think I would like to say cannot both of these be true, but yeah, that's a fair point. I'll give you that the way this specific management has operated, that if there's talking, things are going on one way or another. So yeah, if there's absolutely nothing, somebody's bitter. Listen, you just shut your mouth right now, okay?
If PD Miller wasn't going on right now,
yeah,
this would be another Brock Besser's getting traded season, and it would be everywhere. It would be all anybody's talking about.
Okay, and I'll give you that. No, I'll give you as far as the not optics, as far as how discussions have gone and everything. That is a fair track record to go off of. So as far as that opinion on that, that there's probably no talk is bad talk, I'll give you that. I'm sticking with what I've got, but I'll give you that. That's a fair point. Yeah. We can both be right. I don't understand what you're saying. See, we can still agree to disagree, and also I'm right somehow. I'm
off the show now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm still going to be your friend. Hopefully. I want to get into, maybe this will be the last one. I don't have a top 5 or anything. We'll get into that maybe next week. What's your take on after the struggles and again coming off of that injury?
The trials and tribulations. We haven't even talked about Quinn Hughes getting hurt.
Yeah, I don't think we have time, but we can make it work, I suppose. I want to get into Thatcher Demko. Based on last night's game, and I know it's one game, and there was definitely a lot of luck in that game, but that's how goaltending goes. What did you think about that game? Like, what was your takeaway from Thatcher Demko after last night? After what we've seen, and then after last night?
That he looked so composed and dominant. Like he just looked like he was in the zone. Like I don't know what lame, 90s 2000 analogy that you can post. Like that was Demko last night. He looked so good. He looked so dialed in. And there wasn't times during the game where I would watch him go like, oh, I wonder if that looks like it's something that might have hurt him, or like you could see just sort of this little bit of tentativeness, and at that level, a little bit of tentativeness is something that gets you beat, right? But he just looked
Instinctive.
like I wasn't thinking about at any point during the game. I wasn't thinking to myself, okay, he's starting to feel it. He's looking a little better. Okay, like I wasn't thinking about the injury. I wasn't thinking about how he looked in comparison to last game. All I could think about during that whole game was like, man, he looks so good. That was unreal. I can't believe he made that save. And it just didn't look like they could beat him, even when they were beating him and hitting posts. It didn't look something that like that. It didn't look like a play that he was out of at any moment. Super
Yeah,
stoked to see that game.
and
That
then he
is
had the shift.
a game for him this year.
And then he had the shift. Remember? Did you see any
Oh.
tweets on that? The shift.
That was crazy. That was a crazy shift by Colorado. I can't believe they were pulling it around like that. And then those 3 saves that he made in sequence, and then even the glove save was not like as flashy as it could have been, only because he was in such good position to make that save.
That was a heavy, because he loses his stick at the beginning of that shift, of that sequence, right? And you're like, okay, you're just counting it down. You're like, not that he's not having a good game, but like, numbers don't lie. At some point, he's going to have to be out of position or not have that one hole blocked, right? And then he goes and makes the first 5-alarm save, and then they go around the net, makes the second one. And you're like, okay. I said to the wife, I'm like, they need to stop this play right now, because I said the further this goes, this is going to end in a goal. And then I think 2 more shots, and then he finally makes that save and stops, and the whole Rogers Arena is going electric. And like it was so much fun to watch and nerve-wracking at the same time, because that's the Demko. Like that was Vezina Demko right there.
Oh yeah.
Like it was everything we've been hoping would come back. And just in one shift, again, as a game, he looked great. But in that one shift, it was like, man, I'm so happy that he is the goaltender for this team, because I couldn't imagine anyone else right now. And then I thought, I'm like, oh man, imagine if, as a stupid fan base, we're like, yeah, we should trade Demko. And we said that. Is there a controversy that they maybe have to think about it? That's the kind of game like, man, I was wrong. I can't believe I said those words, because he was unfreaking believable.
Yeah, insane. Like quick
Oh,
question.
Johnny, how you doing, buddy?
If you could sign Demko for a reasonable contract, money wise, how many years would you give him? Like, he's 28 now. You're looking at re-signing him 29. So what was Jonathan Quick's like last big term contract? Do you remember?
Wasn't it another 5 or was it a 6?
Yeah, I mean,
term. I'm thinking term. Sorry.
Yeah, of course, term. Like I think the price sort of is irrelevant at this point.
Yeah, you're just thinking term.
Term wise, I feel like, yeah. I think you want to, in a perfect world, give him 5. Like I think he wants 7. So I think you have to say, I think reasonably his camp can ask for 7. So I think you have to think like it's probably going to be an 8-year deal, and then you pay a little bit more.
Yeah.
Per year. So. Yeah, I don't know what the valuation is yet. I don't think we have enough information on that. I think you need to find out what Demko is for the rest of the season.
Did he sign a 10-year deal? Was that his LA one? Was a 10-year deal? Contract history. I'm just.
How old was he when he signed the 10-year deal?
10 years.
So how old was he when he signed the 10-year deal?
27.
27. So
no, sorry, no. 26. He was 26.
26. Okay, that makes more sense. So 728.
5.8.
Yeah, so that
5.8 for 10 years.
I think that puts Demko at like a 7-8 year salary. Like I think that's too much. So I would want it to be one less year. I think like a 6 would be kind of like your perfect wheelhouse. And then you have to pay him probably a few more bucks past that. Because I think if you look at how Jonathan Quick ages out towards the end of his contract in LA, you're probably looking at Demko to do like a bit of a similar trajectory.
Could you not get him?
8 years does sound steep. Like that's too many.
I wonder, could you not get him
ideal
at
world
like
is probably 6.
Could you not get him at 5 with a higher cap?
Maybe. Yeah,
Like
I mean, I don't
spend
know
a
the
little bit more
goaltending
shorter
market.
term,
Yeah,
but
it's
spend a bit more and go shorter term. So like, because we all know how goaltending works. Like, it's pretty rare where you get full market value, or you get not market value, full value out of a goaltender after a certain point. So could you not do another 5 and just be like, hey, we're going to pay you more? And
he might also just like he might be wanting the contract that he gets until he's 37. What again? I'll go back to the quick thing. Like, how old was he when he wrapped up in LA? Like
36 or 37.
Yeah, so 36, 37. So you're looking at maybe a 6 or a 7 year deal. 8 is crazy. Like, he's
Yeah,
going to
you can't go
retire
8.
before that. Like 38, 39. Like,
Yeah.
that's
And with his injury history too, like that's the other thing. Like, I look at 5 and I think, man, that's a nice sweet spot. It's not a crazy term, but maybe you have to sign him for a bit more. And maybe there's a little bit more money. I mean, the cap is going up and it's going to go up the year after as well. So maybe you're thinking like, we can afford to throw another 2 million at him. So maybe he's making 7 instead of 5, and you get him at 5 years. And exactly, for this specific player, like, Demmer's amazing, but you have to be realistic too. I'm also realistic that if he continues to play even remotely close to this, and it's going to tail off obviously as he gets older, but I mean, 7 mil, 5 years of 5 years at 7, that's not terrible. I'd say that's fair market value, and you're still getting your guy locked up. And even if he had to be traded somewhere else down the road, that's probably about what that type of player on a deal, not like a deal, but on a tradable contract would be making.
I think like it goes back to, I think the deal that Vancouver wants to get him at, what I would want to get him at is 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think he probably wants 7 or 8, and I think the push is 6. Like, you're gonna have to meet in the middle. They're gonna have to come up a bit. They're gonna have to go down a year. I just think what's gonna happen. I think 6 if they sign him. What I want 5.
Yeah, I think 6 probably you're going to get for a little less money, but that may please the player more than the team. I think the team would want 5, and I'd be okay with spending a little bit more. I mean, whatever market you're in, whoever your goalie is, like, we all know that nobody really wants to sign goaltenders for a ton of money and a ton of term because it rarely works out. There are probably less than a handful that have panned out, and even then, like, Bobrovsky took a hit before he came back, right? Like, all of a sudden that contract looked like the absolute biggest anchor, and then he backed it up a little bit after that. But I mean, that freaked out a lot of people, right? So, there's more times than not that goaltending backfires on you for signing those big deals. I mean, the Canucks did have one for a while. Unfortunately, it was the drama that got to the situation because Luongo didn't suck. But
do we have enough from Johnny? Do we have enough in the pipeline with Silovs to not want to commit to that?
We don't know. I don't think they know.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's a good question, Johnny. I think you have to find out what goes on with.
Great question from the professor, by the way.
Yeah, you have to find out what goes on with Demko for the remainder of the season and evaluate whether you think he's fit for another contract. That sounds silly, but whether he's fit for another contract. I think Silov's development is definitely stalled this year, right? I think they were really hoping for him to sort of take position or possession of that number 2 spot. I think they saw something right away. That's why they went out and did what they did to get their hands on Lankinen. Without Lankinen, this team isn't even sniffing around a playoff or a wild card spot. So I think that the team is probably continuing to evaluate him. Like, you better believe they've had conversations on whether they think that Kevin Lankinen can carry the mail for this squad moving forward, and then there's a level of cap savings. The part of the problem is what are you going to have to pay Lankinen if you do indeed believe he's a starter on this squad? So there's going to be a little bit of a challenge in that sense. And as far as the Silovs thing goes, like, Tolopilo is a good goalie. Like, Nikita Tolopilo, had this thing had gone on longer with Demko, and there was issues or injuries or Silovs having to start, and this team was in position, like I think that Nikita Tolopilo was going to get a shot to play some games this year, and that is another huge athletic goaltender who's got a really good track record playing in Europe and is already at an advanced age and has had time to calm his game down. He's probably right in and around the time where he's starting to come into his own and hit a bit of prime. So that could be a guy that does make some noise for the squad down the road if he was to ever have to. The question is, though, do they have enough? I don't think they have quite enough right now. I still think Demko is the answer.
I think you could probably even wrap the Shilovs kind of uncertainty into even last season. Like the way that season went as a whole and all the things that happened, and then how this season started and how they saw not the same goalie that they got at the end of last season. You could probably wrap a little bit into that from last year. Like he's probably an overperformer last year. Not probably. He did. He overperformed in the moment, which was great. I mean, that was about as perfect as you could have seen a guy that made no sense being where he was. And push came to shove this season and it wasn't working out. And that's why Lankinen has worked. But again, you can send him back down and you can let him work on his craft. And now you can find out, and it doesn't have to cost you anything. Potentially, you can either continue to develop and maybe his end game is ultimately, a rare call up for an NHL team, whether it's the Canucks or not. And, Tolopilo's the guy who knows, but they, just like they were able to send Höglander down and Podkolzin down, prior, it's the same as goaltending. And in this case, they can afford to see this through and make a decision later rather than sooner. Because I think in the last 15 years, the Canucks have been forced to make the sooner decision more times than not.
Yeah, like don't get it twisted. The fact that I don't think that they don't have enough on this roster right now means that Demko's still the guy. I really like Kevin Lankinen, and I think that he can do some tidy business up here. But just because it's not in the roster doesn't mean that you couldn't go sign yourself a high-end backup to contribute alongside a guy like Kevin Lankinen and play more of a platoon, with obviously Lankinen taking the lion's share. I mean, it could be a decent situation for them if they feel they have to go that route.
Yeah, if you've got enough of a team game, and we can finish up basically on how the defense looks. I'm a lot more confident in this current defense. If something crazy happened as far as the goaltending situation goes, I'm a lot happier. I'm a lot more confident on the back end that the puck's going to be away from the goal a little bit more than it used to be, which also means that the goaltender doesn't have to be as stellar. Playoffs is a different story, and that is yet to be written, but it does make it a little bit easier when you've got that. You can kind of think these things through a little bit longer. I think it's bought them, at least a year worth of time based on the defense they currently have, just because you've got that option now where you're a little bit more trusting in what's ahead of the goaltender. And you have to see what's up on forward, but that's the more important position right now, I would say, is that defense is shored up.
Yeah, we want to get this team to the point where it's performing at a clip that doesn't require Thatcher Demko to be amazing every single game, right? And shoring up the decor is sort of the first step to making that happen. And if you look at prime Vancouver, in the Luongo era, the best version of himself existed on those sort of defensive teams that were sort of porous of scoring, right? So
yeah,
everything was sort of sucked back into making sure that 100% defense was being played. By the time they roll around to the Stanley Cup final, the team isn't contingent on Luongo being high-end Luongo. It's just him. We just need a guy that can be good enough and then be there if we need him, right? And I think if Vancouver can get to that level with Thatcher Demko, then they'll be in pretty good shape.
I'll take it. If it means he's got to work not as hard every game, I'm a big fan of that. I think everybody's a big fan. It just means you've got a healthy, loose Demko for when it matters. And I mean, Lankinen's really made this a lot easier. So, Demko's probably just getting started this season, right? Like he's just warming up to where he's going to be comfy. Well, this is a great time to start warming up because for all we know, he could get hot as it gets towards the end of the regular season into the playoffs. I'll take that every single day. That's what I think. Ted, how you feel, man?
Feeling like it's just about time.
First one on the new in the new house. First one in the new house. We got figured out. This I think this is going to work out over here at Area 51. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. I think I'll stay
It's
a
good.
while.
Man, there's a good group of people. We got Johnny, the professor. Can't wait for ball, buddy. Cannot wait. Hope the kid's doing well. We got Grant. We've had who else was in here today? Maybe it was just those two. Either way, it's good. It's a good time. It's a good time.
Good.
Yeah, good. Well, folks, we're gonna call it a night. We're gonna call it a night on the show. Make sure you tip your waiter, and I mean, I would like to watch some Canucks hockey. A little, no drama for the next week would be nice. Just normal games. Quinn Hughes is injured, so let's find out what they're like without him. Yeah, on behalf of my good friend Chili Crunch Ted, I'm Ryan. This is the PP1 podcast on Area 51 Sports Network. Let's do it again next week. Go Canucks.